Hi, this is CKnappenberger, and this is Module 3, Special Education Interviews for EDL853 in the spring of 2018. My interviewees, the administrator was Mrs. Whitney Perot. She's the Director of Special Services for the New Milford Public Schools. She's in the past been a principal as well as a special education teacher. I also interviewed Mrs. Allison Doherty. She's a special education teacher at David Jones Middle School, and she was a former special education teacher in Bergenfield. And then my final interviewee was the instructional aide, Mr. Brett Carroll. He's an instructional aide at BF Gibbs. He is also a former physical education teacher in Franklin Lakes. So the first question I asked was, what child find procedures are practiced in our district? So the person who could speak the most to this was Mrs. Perot. Mrs. Perot was speaking about how it's on the schools. It's posted in our schools, so everything's sent to the schools. It's also posted on the website for parents to view, as well as the information is then provided to local pediatricians' offices. So they're provided to all the local pediatricians, so that if parents are looking for any information, they can find it there. Mrs. Doherty said that she was unsure. She did know that she had to update her website as far as different things that were happening in her class, class sizes, things like that. She also had to address certain things at back to school night in front of the different grade levels to get them to know. And then finally, Mr. Carroll spoke again about being unsure as to exactly what the child find procedures were, but he was aware that, the parents expressed a need, which is where his position was created through an IEP addendum. Next question was, what do you find to be the most challenging part of your role in regards to special education? Mrs. Pro spoke about the fact that there were a lot of different challenges, almost too many for her to name or list in our short interview time. But she did say that a couple that she focused on was requests for testing. It's almost become unmanageable in her time as the Director of Special Services, that it is very difficult to meet all of these requests for testing for students for special services. Budgeting, asking to have a realistic budget when the cost of education and materials and skills has gone higher and higher, while her budget is staying the same or even getting less every year. Last thing was unrealistic parent requests. Parent requesting certain services or certain things to be done, whether it's a one-to-one aid or certain programs or accommodations for the child that is just unrealistic to what can be provided in district. Mrs. Doherty spoke to the idea about curriculum and that there is no special education curriculum, that they are following the regular curriculum. So she finds that year to year, she's really struggling to modify or keep up with the demands of state testing and to keep up with the demands of what the curriculum requires. So she was really kind of saying that the curriculum wise, also in one section of a class, the levels that she has, that for a smaller population of students, how different the levels can be inside the classroom, and kind of looking at either having other sections of the same class, such as 7th grade resource room, language arts, if they could, have different sections to kind of divide students up by more need-based and skill-based to kind of help benefit them inside the special education program. Mr. Carroll spoke about the idea of working with younger students was difficult. He's in a classroom right now, which is 2nd and 3rd grade from the IBC program, which is our autistic program. So working with them and collaborating with the adults, he said, is a real struggle. Having adults all get on the same page about something and kind of working with them for the best needs of the students. What's the most rewarding part of your job? Mrs. Perot said parent trust, when she starts with a parent who is very untrusting or can be difficult to work with at first, and then throughout the program or throughout the planning for their child, they begin to trust the program and the group and the team that's working with them. That's very rewarding for her. Watching a student go from a very restrictive environment to a lesser restrictive environment, or the least restrictive environment for that student, and watching that student have successes is very rewarding. Acceptance by peers. Watching a special education student be genuinely accepted as an equal by their general education peers is one of the greatest rewards that Mrs. Perot spoke about. in being the director of special services. Mrs. Doherty was really quick to say, when kids don't need me anymore. That's the most rewarding part, is when they don't need me to do work independently. She spoke about moving students from outside of our resource room into an in-class support setting. Again, kind of going to what Mrs. Pro said about the least restrictive environment, how good that feels. Also, sharing small joys and growth, when she can call a parent and say, your kid read for the 20 minutes today that they were supposed to be reading independently without, having to be redirected or anything like that. Being able to kind of share those small pieces with parents was a really rewarding thing for her. Mr. Carroll was talking about the excitement the students have to see him. It's so rewarding when he walks in the morning and the kids are genuinely excited to see him or to talk to him or to give him a hug. He was talking about that being very rewarding. And also parents knowing who he is. He was saying that, to know that he's never spoke to a parent or talked to a parent, but the child's going home to talk about him, obviously in a positive way. That was very rewarding to him. What advice do they have about supervision of special education staff? Mrs. Pro said, tools in their toolkit, empower these different support staffs, giving them the professional development that they need, the tools in their toolkit that they need to be successful. They have the most one-to-one contact with our students, and we need to kind of value that and provide them the proper training so that they can do the best that they can do for our students. Being visible. She was talking a lot about how, as the director of special services, she can get tied to her desk. And she said, I could spend my entire career inside my office and never leave and still have work to do. She said, but take the time to kind of get out there and see what they're doing. You can't make a judgment call on the way someone runs a classroom or the way that a para is interacting with a student if you've never seen it firsthand. She also, one of the things she kept saying was, hire smarter than you. Always hire people who are smarter than you. It makes your job easier, and it makes it easier to trust that they're doing what is absolutely right for our students, special education students as well as general education students. Mrs. Doherty spoke about the instructional aides in her class, having clear expectations for them, telling them that this is what you need to do. And then communicating as you're going along, having that open communication to say, don't hover with this student needs this or this student needs that. And if your expectations are clear and you have open communication between yourself and the instructional aide, it'll be a lot easier. Also, as far as speech, OT, PT, all of those kind of different people that a special education teacher might deal with within a student's schedule, letting us know what's going on. If they're going for OT every week and they still are struggling with holding a pencil, or they're still struggling with the way that they write or the way that they walk or anything like that, OT, PT, just let us know. Let's talk about this, because I can also help in my class as much as possible. So Mrs. Doherty spoke about having a more open communication between some of the support staff and her as the classroom teacher, so that we're supporting the child to learn those skills everywhere. Mr. Carroll spoke about keeping everyone in the loop. And again, this kind of idea of clear communication seems to be straight across the board. Let us know. Let us know if I need to do something. Let me know if there's something that I'm doing in the classroom that you don't like or that you don't think is as beneficial, especially as an instructional aide. Have the teacher tell me, we need you to do something else to be more successful. You're the expert. I'm in for that. Use everyone to a student's advantage, to all the students' advantages. He might be an instructional aide, which sometimes people are instructional aides, whatever, but he's I'm useful. I'm actually a certified teacher. I enjoy the kids and I want the best for them. So tell me what it is that you need from me, and I'm willing to do that, but you have to be able to use me to the student's advantage. So find out my skill sets, find out what, everyone else's skill sets is that's working inside your classroom, and use it all to your advantage. How do you effectively work with parents of special needs children? Mrs. Perot actually spoke about the fact that she was a special education teacher. She has a child with special needs herself, and now being the director of special services, that when she works with parents, she's a very personal connection to the entire process. But also remembering their frustration. They have a child who has special needs. And therefore, when those special needs aren't being met, there's this frustration that comes with that. There's frustration that comes along with the whole thing. She even talked about guilt being involved, and that you need to remember that when you're dealing with a parent, because they're advocating for their child. And any parent out there knows that you're going to do what's best for your child. And when those parents are sitting in that meeting, especially with her, if the meeting has come to her attention or she needs to be there, obviously they're frustrated with some portion of that process so far, and to kind of remember that when you're talking to them or dealing with them. She also spoke about knowing the children, especially as an administrator. Don't call someone back if you haven't read the file. Don't walk into a meeting if you don't understand what's going on and that you don't have all the facts. Don't ever go blind into something, because that is just going to breed bad feelings and frustrate more people. So make sure that you're kind of aware of what's going on. Mrs. Doherty spoke about sharing the good with the bad. She shared that story about calling a parent and saying they read for 20 minutes without being redirected. This is such a win. And that kind of idea of sharing the good, so that when you do have to share the bad, or you do have to work with them on something, that they're not, neglecting it, or they don't want to talk to you. Mr. Carroll said being consistent in order to earn that trust, and again, keeping up that communication between parents so that they're aware that you want to help their child. Working with regular teachers that have students with special needs, Mrs. Pro talked about debunking the myths. Don't ever assume something, and kind of letting your regular ed teachers give them the information, help them out, so that they're not kind of have this bad feeling or unsureness about something. Provide support and teach sensitivity. They kind of go hand in hand, she said. Let's give some professional development offerings to them so that they do know what's going on and that they are being able to work effectively. Mrs. Doherty again spoke about collaboration to ensure proper placement. When she's pushing a kid out of resource and wants them to go to in-class support, she wants to make sure that she knows what the in-class support setting requires so that she's putting them in the right placement. Also, in helping modify curriculum, she speaks to the general education teachers often to make sure that everything's kind of linking together and doing what it's supposed to. Mr. Carroll again spoke about the paras or instructional aides being an asset. He's an asset in that room. Please use that. And he wants to prove that he is that. So being consistent in order to show that he's there for the benefit of the students, just like everybody else is. What advice do you have for first-year administrators? I'm going to go back to Mrs. Perot's. I'm going to do the other ones first. Mrs. Doherty said, obviously, and Mr. Carroll said the same thing. I don't really know, I don't know necessarily, but what I can say is consistency. Treat everyone with fairness and consistency, and realizing everyone's a resource. Mrs. Doherty also spoke about stressing the importance of data. A lot of times first-year special education teachers aren't aware, or special education teachers aren't aware of how important data can be. Mrs. Pro, being an administrator, spoke, almost yelled, build relationships. You need to build relationships. And to build those relationships so that people trust you and so that you can trust other people, you have to listen to them. You need to follow through on whatever it is that you've decided, and you need to be consistent with how you treat everyone. So again, going back to the idea of consistency as well as treating everyone with fairness. Mrs. Pro was very big on the building relationships. You can't have a building run properly if there's no connection to the people in the building. How would you describe the role of special education teachers in building? A lot of them said the same for general education teachers, special education teachers. They're the general education teachers. It's the same. The only thing is that there is a higher expectation for meeting certain expectations. They needed to put more effort into planning and putting a curriculum together. They didn't really speak to building principle as much, where Mr. Carroll spoke about knowing that you're the captain of the ship. Know your building, know your people. Again, going back to that idea of building those relationships as a building principal. And also as a special ed teacher, you need to facilitate learning. Regardless of a student's struggles, they need to be able to learn inside your classroom. What characteristics do you seek in aspiring administrators with regard to special education? Rely on your staff. Hire staff you can rely on. That's what Mrs. Perot said. Mrs. Doherty talked about being inclusive. Don't forget that special education is a part of your building and should be a factor inside of it. They shouldn't be an afterthought. They shouldn't be pushed off to the side. They should, again, be included. Mr. Carroll spoke about the idea of respect what every staff member has to offer, which is kind of the theme of what he said, is that, like, I'm a para, but I'm really trying to be there to help, and I want to do what's best for all of our students. Finally, my reflection, just looking at hire smarter to make your life easier, what Mrs. Pro said, I'm hoping that I can be able to do that. Remember motivation. Remember why you're there, why your staff is there. Treat everyone as a great resource, which comes from what Mr. Carroll was talking about. Everyone down to my paras is a resource I need. And being consistent in the way that I treat people. Again, that's all working on those relationships. So all those other things are going towards kind of working on those relationships with being consistent, treating everyone fairly, and hire smarter. Thank you.